Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Great Exhibition Road Festival, new online series of events where we are bringing the best of art and science from across South Kensington to your homes. I just want to say really quickly that we've been having some technical difficulties, but Jack and Andrew, they live in the same house and they're in the same bubble. So if anything happens, they'll jump onto one computer and continue talking to us. Just bear with. My name is Vistalia Chilton. I'm the director of Kensington and Chelsea Art Week, which is one of the festival partners. Today, we've got a great discussion lined up for you. We'll be talking to emerging composers from Royal College of Music on an exciting new project they've been completing called Treephonia, where they have been exploring new forms of music making to reimagine the natural environments through sound. We'll even be sharing some of that music with you today, along with some mindful listening exercise that you can take away. But before I introduce our speakers, I would just like to remind everybody that today is an interactive discussion, and that we'd love to hear your thoughts and comments and questions throughout. Just write to us on the YouTube chat function. And one of our team is working away in the background, and we'll be passing them on for me to ask you and to answer. And please be considerate when posting in the chat. We'll be removing anything that disrupts the experience for others. And now, I'd like to introduce our speakers. We've got Andrew Joe, who is an Australian composer studying at the Royal College of Music. Previously, Andrew studied science and engineering at the University of Sydney. Andrew's music has been premiered at the National Portrait Gallery in London and the National Library of Australia, the Adelaide Festival Centre, and Vivid Sydney at Chatsworth. And of course, the City of Sydney Lunar New Festival.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Then we've got Ben. Ben Munro is a composer in his second year of study in composition and jazz piano at the Royal College of Music. His compositions focus on combining elements of visuals and traditional notation to create new hybrid scores with previous work, including pieces performed by the Leeds Symphony Orchestra. Hello, Ben.
Hi, thank you for having me. Excited to talk to everybody today.
And last but not least, we've got Jack Giaconis, who studies composition at the Royal College of Music. He writes both for electronics and acoustics instruments, and his work has been performed at venues such as the National Portrait Gallery and the Snape Maltings. As well as music for the concert hall, he has composed for film and enjoys bringing imagined worlds and stories to life through sound. Welcome, Jack.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
So we're going to start the conversation with all the composers, but just really quickly, we wanted to give you a sense of what they've been working on, just in case you haven't had a chance to have a look at Treephonia. This is going to be a small trailer that lasts 2 seconds. Have a look at this just to get you in the mood. Wow, that was so relaxing. I feel immediately very relaxed. So what an amazing concept. I've got a first opening question to all three composers, please. If we could just go in order of Andrew, Ben, and Jack, just a couple of words. What was your role in this project, please?
Sure.
And that is a question to Andrew, please.
Yeah, so I was one of the main creators of Treephonia. And basically what Treephonia is an online audio-visual experience where you can explore the trees of Kensington Gardens. So 17 composers from the Royal College of Music wrote music for different trees. And I wrote music for the London plane tree and also co-composed music for the white ash tree.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. It's quite interesting that everybody has a role. And next we've got Ben. What was your role?
Yep. So my role was mainly on the website where some trees' canopies overlap. There are mixes of music, of multiple people's music, where you can hear them all at the same time. So I was mainly based on the music editing and helping compile those pieces together that you hear in the curated multi-mixes on the website.
Brilliant. And Jack?
Yeah, so my role, like Andrew and Ben, was partly in composing some of the trees and arranging multi-mixes. But I was also responsible for the map and for doing the visual part of the website as well.
I mean, if you think about this, you've got three brilliant composers and musicians. And I know from the conversations that we had before this meeting that nobody has coding experience. And this whole website project was actually built from scratch without any prior knowledge of engineering. So this is really interesting. I wanted to sort of develop this question a bit more. And this is a question for Ben. You described this project as a new form of music making. How was it unique from what you've done before? And what did it teach you? And that's for Ben.
Yeah, so I think it applies for all three of us as composers, that especially kind of in the modern present day, I think being a composer is all about the collaboration and what you choose to create with other people. And it's kind of everybody's helping everybody else out to realize their own creative vision. So prior to this project, I'd done pieces myself which combined visuals and sound in sort of differing ways. And then what I learned from this project was kind of new skills and bringing that together for other people. So all the composers wrote their pieces individually for their trees without the knowledge of how it would fit together in the end. And then our role in making the site was trying to honor their original intentions with their individual pieces and help create something as part of a collective. So the biggest thing I learned was this new sort of community music making, which I think is really valuable to go forward into my work in the future.
And that's a really interesting point you make, because learning from this project, I realized that when you are studying at the Royal College of Music, you have a pool of musicians who you could tap up for, or give me a sound. What does that sound like on the violin? Or let me test this concept out with another instrument that you haven't had before. And there's this essence of collaboration between everybody, isn't there?
Yeah, I think this project kind of in a way symbolizes that, especially in the composition department. If you need help with something, somebody's always there that knows the answer. So it's nice to have access to kind of that collective knowledge, and also the collective, as you can hear in the project, the collective stylistic differences between everybody, and it coming together in a really nice way for people who are watching and anybody that goes to the website to experience that in one place.
Well, yes, and I will get onto that a bit later, because there were 190 compositions in the whole project, as I understand. All different.
190 trees. So I think
trees.
Over 30 compositions, but a lot of the trees had the same music, in the sense that there would be one species, but maybe a single piece of music applied to many trees of that species.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of work. And just following on to Jack, what different methods and instruments did you use to compose these pieces as a composer?
So, yeah, for me, the question that arose when I was trying to write the music was, how do I capture the character of the tree that I was writing for? And so one of my trees was the yew tree, and I was looking at the sort of mythology of the yew tree and its natural appearance as well, and thinking, well, what instruments could I use that represent this? And I was trying to give the impression that the tree was sort of breathing in a way, and so I was drawn to wind instruments for that. particularly wooden wind instruments. I felt that the sound would be would work for the tree. And so, yeah, I used clarinet for that piece. But there are all kinds of other effects you can get with instruments that aren't so conventional. For instance, you can click the keys in a funny way on a clarinet, which produces some really interesting sounds. So yeah, just kind of trying to capture that essence of the tree.
When I listened to that composition, I know when we talked, I actually felt like the tree was breathing. It was a trigger point in the way you used clever sound techniques to give it that essence of breathing. But I've got a really funny question. I'm going to have to put this on the chat. There's a question from Charlotte. Is there any reference to sneezing in the music for the plane trees? I know the plane tree season in South Kent is a challenge for some of my colleagues with allergy. Great question. Maybe next time, please include some sneezing. I don't know.
That's the first time I've heard of the sneezing. I mean, I did quite a bit of research about the plane trees, but I wonder if that has any relation to the fact that the bark is known to be quite a good absorbent of pollution. I mean, I think that's why there are so many plane trees around London, is that they take away from all the city pollution, and the bark sheds really easily. So it's a good way of sort of environmental management. But sneezing, this is the first time I've heard of it. So.
I can see that becoming a sort of a really interesting composition next time. There's also a very big compliment to you from Bill, really beautiful. And the question is, did you go to Kensington Park and record in situ, or was it all created indoors?
So, I mean, I can, if nobody else wants to jump in, for one of my pieces on the site, I actually made my own synthesized instrument out of sounds of London. So in the instrument, I went to Hyde Park, Kensington Gardens, Piccadilly Circus, and an underground station. I think it was Green Park. And I recorded, basically just set my phone recording in those locations just to see what was there at the time. Went back home, chopped it all up into pieces, and then sort of arranged the sounds one by one onto like the keys of a keyboard. And they were also kind of pitched. So then I played that on one of the pieces as well. And so it's kind of like a London instrument, if you like. So yeah, I did use real sound from the location in those pieces.
That's interesting, and I think when I've been exploring the site quite significantly, and there's lots of questions coming in. It's quite interesting, but we'll get into it in a minute because we'll start talking about the technicalities and how you built the website and the mammoth task that you had there. But let's just move on to the next questions. So this is about the unique style of collaboration, what happened, and how you managed to do this as three composers. You know, just thinking about the concept of writing about the trees and nature, what it means. Do you think, as a composer, is your role to create a narrative for each, sort of a story for each tree? And this is for Jack. You've composed the yew tree composition, and did you feel that you needed to tell a narrative?
I felt that lent itself, as I mentioned before, to capturing the character. That was really the main thing for me, and inventing a sort of a little story or bringing some kind of human elements to the tree helped me to do that, and perhaps it comes through in the music. But yeah, for instance, the breathing, imagine that the tree is breathing and that it's sort of talking in a way. Yeah, I found that as a really useful compositional tool. I also wrote the music for Southern Magnolia, and it's the only tree of its kind in the park. So I wrote this sort of kind of, I invented this idea that it was kind of on its own, a bit lonely, but this very old majestic tree, and came up with that little narrative. Yeah. So yeah, for me, narrative was a big point. But I know there are lots of other ways that various composers have approached the project.
Yeah. And of course, we if you've explored the website, you will see that a lot of trees overlap. And there is an element to this project where the compositions come together, and you listen to one tab, one that's open, another tab can be open, and the two compositions will overlap each other. And there is a special function within the system that allows you to listen to random trees at once. And this is where it all came in for you all to create work that actually maybe complements the others. And we'll have a chance to listen maybe to one of those. There is the combination piece that was created by both Jack and Andrew, I believe. I think maybe it's a good idea to listen to it quickly, just to get a sense of what it is.
Absolutely. I think we have a clip of it.
Yeah, we have a clip, and I think it's going to start playing any second.
Yeah, here we go.
I'm going to ask you all to explain what was going on there. And since we were just finishing to speak to Jack, could you just explain what was going on in that music clip that we just heard?
Yeah, so you can hear multiple trees in that little clip, and our role as sort of curating the various compositions into a multi-composition was sort of working out how each piece fit within the texture and the context of the piece. So some things you can hear, for instance, my yew tree was used as a melodic element. When there's another tree that's used as a drone underneath, Ben's provides a really cool introduction. Yeah, so that's a bit of a summary there.
But there was no I think the reason why we chose this particular combination was that it just worked so perfectly, and I don't think there was any discussion between composers, what key to write in, what sort of elements. It just, by chance, the fact that these three trees were in proximity to each other, imagining if standing in that environment, hearing the three trees sort of interacting with each other, I think just relying on chance and each composer having a sense of how much space their piece occupied. A lot of people chose to write very singular ideas, which was a good thing because it meant that simple things could be combined with other elements, and it really meshed together well when we put everything together.
Yeah, and just on that idea of sort of approaches in that multi-mix, specifically, my sort of reversed piano washing rolling sound is at the start, and it was near the end as well where the clip stopped. My approach to writing the pieces was to kind of try and provide some focus or narrative, but at the same time leave it open for other people's and the combinations. And then when you heard Jack speak, he was speaking more about representing like a tree's function. So he said like the majestic tree on its own, for example. So I think it's interesting as well how sometimes differing approaches still fit together really, really well, as you can hear. And I think there's a lot of situations on the site in the mixes, and as well if you just, as Vistale said, open random tabs and just see what happens. There's more kind of things that do fit together than don't, which is a really kind of amazing thing considering everybody composed these individually without deciding, as Andrew said, on like a key to write in or a set of sounds to use. It was all just kind of by chance that all of this stuff happened to work really well together.
Yeah, well, this is so easy for me to get on to the next question, because I wanted to ask you, you call yourselves the curators of the unknown, which I thought was a brilliant term. And I guess it really, what you've just discussed is a sort of receiving the content from the other composers. That's how I understand it. But I'd love to hear what you think. And Andrew and Ben, would you mind sharing this question? It's just giving us a bit of an insight to what it means to be a curator of the unknown.
Sure. Well, I guess we can split it into two, because you can be a curator of the unknown as a composer, and then also, while we were making Treephonia, as more of a director or producer. And maybe Ben can talk about the directing side. But as a composer, as I was saying earlier, you have to think about writing, which has so many functions. It has to work on its own. It can be a pleasant experience itself, but then leave for potential other things to occur. Maybe that might be giving silence to your piece, having it breathe, which is perfect. Thinking about trees, Jack incorporated the element. Maybe it might mean keeping your piece in a low register or a high register, so that you aren't taking up a lot. And there can be a beat that other composers can join in with. There was a composed a purely. I think this worked really well when we were putting together, because it seemed to fit together perfectly with every. And it understanding
Andrew,
music.
I think it's maybe my connection, but you're breaking up a little bit.
I can approach the. I'll answer the second part of the question.
While we resolve a little bit of that issue, maybe Ben, would you mind saying finishing off that sentence?
Yeah, no problem. So more on the kind of curating in the sense of combining all the individual composers' works together. I think the main thing to me was to really think about when we say two pieces work together, what does that really mean? Does that mean that they are in the same key, or they make some kind of chord together? Does it mean that the sound that they make is necessarily satisfying? And I think over the course of the project, we learned that things don't have to sound sort of aesthetically nice together in order to be classified as working well together. I think in order to make a good balance on the site, it was about kind of almost letting go of our individual kind of opinions on things, and more trying to just evaluate the music, more in the sense of, is this too hectic? Is this too sparse? Rather than saying, does this sound nice? Or is this something someone would want to listen to? And I think that kind of level of honesty to the people's original ideas is what kind of characterizes the project. And I just saw a comment from Angela about people recovering from depression. One of the methods recommended to them is to use a hole in a tree, pour out their grief when you can't find anyone to talk to. It just struck me as it came up in the comments, because on the topic of sort of direction, everybody that wrote for the trees has a different connection to them. So some people decided to go after the narrative and become really personal with the tree and write for it, and that does have kind of meditative kind of aspects to it in a way. And others chose to be kind of more removed and write for the group and write pieces which are more open to collaboration. So I think it is kind of a form of therapy, at least for me when I was writing my pieces. It's kind of nice to associate with something and then have it be connected with others in that way. So it's an interesting comment, and I hope that kind of is an answer to that one.
Yeah, I thought that was a really moving point that Angelo made. Thank you so much for that. There's been so many great questions coming in. I hope we could answer some of them. The one question is, what gave you the motivation to do this? This is quite a big one. From Tester 1. Who would like to tackle this? What gave you the motivation to do this?
Yeah,
I can go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, so it all came about really inspired by this app that Royal Parks made. And that was a collaboration with Royal Academy of Music. And this was called Music for Trees. And essentially it was a geolocation app where you would literally go into the park and hear music using your phone. And yeah, seeing as Kensington Gardens was sort of our home close to our South Kensington neighborhood. We thought it would be a nice idea to do something inspired by that and to sort of push the project forward. And obviously, in coronavirus times, we thought, how can we best think about putting a project like this together? How can we transform a natural experience for the home?
Well, that was great. And I'm going to throw this one at Jack. This is a really good question from Mr. Falsey. What instruments were used? How were they? How did you record them? And how many musicians played in each piece? Go for it, Jack.
Great question. It varies on every tree, every composer. Everyone was using different tools and instruments to create the music. One approach was that we would, I know a lot of composers went out and recorded found sounds, like Ben was talking about recording the sounds of London, bringing that into production software, as well as recordings of instruments and things, and then meshing it all together and constructing a piece out of that sonic material. Another approach was to write a conventional score and give it to an ensemble and record that in an acoustic setting. And others were purely synthetic and were all created with synthesizers. So yeah, there's a right mix.
Yeah, that was it was fascinating to learn that everybody produced their compositions and then sent them to you to make sense of it. And I did really want to knuckle down the question of how that structure came about, how you managed to, I know some of you have engineering backgrounds. I know that you're smart, you're really, really efficient, but to break down such a big project and navigate it for 10 months, I believe when it first started, it was in November 2019. So it's not a 5-minute thing. And I know there was a question from somebody on the chat. Did the composers create music or were inspired by the seasons in any of the compositions? Because it was a long period of time. Who'd like to take?
I can take it. In my pieces, and also when arranging other pieces, I mean, I think there was definitely a conscious effort to be kind of timeless in a way, whatever that means, and not make something that's aesthetic to one particular season or one particular point in time. And sort of the sounds I chose to use with the instrument involving sounds in London that I compiled together. And that's kind of an example of that. It's taking a snippet of one piece in time and the sounds that were there, and then using them to create something that will last over the seasons, which I think is a nice thing to think about. That even though it was in the moment at that time, somebody listening to the website, months from now, will hear that just as kind of like the sound of that location and not specific to that day. So that's what I try to focus on with the pieces in my compositions.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And just going back to the mammoth task of putting it all together, Andrew, I know you suddenly became Mr. Coder for the project and taught yourself how to build websites. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's mind-boggling, really, because it's project management, essentially. Yeah. And in my view, of course, because you've got the composers' minds, you probably know how to multitask and how to bring, various facets together. And this is one of your talents, I'm guessing. So I'm giving you a little of an excuse there. How did you manage to sort of do all of that? And what was the learning curve?
Well, I guess today there is just so many possibilities of how to put a project like this together. I mean, there are things like virtual reality or 360 video and audio, and we tried a number of things, but I think we just focused on keeping everything very simple and thinking about what our true goals was, and that was to be able to listen to music and to see trees and to hear music together and gain a greater appreciation for trees. And so everything about the website was sort of geared towards keeping everything as simple as possible. We wanted people to click on the website and just be drawn in by colors and sounds and very simple just moving around with your mouse in the most primitive way, and hopefully it doesn't need any explanation and offers a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And hopefully people can get lost in the website and come out with something really special, hopefully.
We've got more questions coming in. It's quite interesting to see so much engagement. There's a question again from Taster1. Have you ever thought about writing a piece about a different part of nature, such as rivers? Who wants to answer that one? Shall we throw it, Jack? How do you feel about answering this question?
Sure, yeah, that's a great idea. I haven't considered that. We've been so immersed in trees for the last. But yeah, there's so many possibilities, really, isn't there? But it all kind of relates to the same thing of connecting with nature and finding some way to express that in a creative way.
Yeah, and so that could be something else that we really wanted to talk about, is how do you learn and where do you start, and about in your observation, is it really about the whole of the park? And how, I know some of the descriptions that I've read from there were descriptions about what the trees meant in terms of pollutants and cleaning the air. There was some references of some Norse mythology and the connecting worlds, the philosophies and the feelings. And I really love that idea of observing trees, as well as where they are right now in front of you, and they're all in contemporary society, but also to go further and find out the history of the tree. That was quite interesting. Andrew, I believe that was your composition that went into the Norse mythology and the connecting worlds. And the meaning of that.
That was the white ash tree, which, I mean, for that tree, which I co-composed with Jack, we started out just with purely sounds. I mean, a lot of the research and sort of historical background about trees and the mythological side, those are sort of things that we encountered during the process, and ideas and narratives started to emerge. But for that particular piece, the white ash tree, we just started with recording a lot of wooden sounds. I remember Jack rolling his chair across the floorboard, and we created this sort of almost like this boat, wooden creaking sound, some large cavern. These ideas, they're all sort of around and up in the air and abstract, but also just fueling how we created the work ultimately. And when we found something that was right, all these things sort of pushed aside, and we just had the music.
Well, I've just got a beautiful note from Tizu. All the composers created the music during the coronavirus lockdown, which is exactly right. That's very generous of you all to share the Treephonia as a form of hope in the context of music with the public. Thank you all. That's such a sweet thing. At the end of this talk, we will have an opportunity to give you some homework, and there'll be something that we can take away and practice ourselves in terms of mindfulness. And we'll go into that a little bit later. But just coming back to our questions. Did you see any value, or has there been any value in observing nature? And this is to Ben. What have you found in this process that gave you any value?
Yeah, so I mean, on my route to college, most days before lockdown and everything, I would go through Kensington Gardens, and I suppose you never really noticed things, or at least I didn't, until this project where I kind of was forced to kind of stop and listen about what was happening. So there's kind of, in familiar environments that you might go through every day, there's definitely sounds that you won't even know were there, and they're different every day. So I went back a few days before I started even researching the trees, just with a kind of empty mind, and then just took down a note of kind of what I heard around the area of my trees. because if people were to listen to the website whilst in the park at the trees, I wanted to make some music that would kind of fit with the surrounding noise, because there's no point writing something really quiet if you're going to be stood next to a tree that's sort of next to a main road and you can't hear anything. So it was about being mindful of the surroundings and capturing a sense of that in the project. And this actually links on to the homework task that Vistalia mentioned. On the event page on the Great Exhibition Road Festival website, there's a PDF of a sheet which is to help increase your mindfulness and connectedness with sounds and nature around you. So in short, you can have a look afterwards, but in short, it involves going to a familiar location or on a familiar journey that you would normally make, and just writing down 3 sounds that you hear maybe each day or each time you go to that place as a kind of diary, and then just keeping a track and looking at how that environment changes over time. And I think surprisingly, even though it might be the same boring train ride, you'll hear different things every time you go there. And this kind of increased connectedness with the environment will hopefully open up kind of new dimensions to the environments that you would normally visit or normally be in. So it's maybe helpful for a bit of a change of scene in the kind of lockdown, as well, as somebody mentioned with the compositions in the pandemic. So yeah, the aim is to try and rediscover our natural environments that we live in, and try and appreciate them in different lights so that they don't get really boring and samey, because that's not really what they are, even though it might be perceived that way.
Yes, and there's a beautiful quote, I think, is in the document that we will all share with you. Will be shared on the YouTube channel. There's a link to the site where you can download this page in one page and practice mindfulness through listening to sounds around you, and just follow a couple of steps that the composers suggest. But at the bottom of this document, there's a sentence that says, "Wherever we are, whatever we hear is mostly noise. When we ignore it, it disturbs us. When we listen to it, it fascinates us." And I think we just disregard a lot of sound, don't we? And this gives us an opportunity to stop and really observe where we are and appreciate the moment of now. We've got a big Welsh Steve on the chat, who is absolutely blown away with the project. Has 2 questions for you. Just going to read them both. The website is beautiful. It's a real accomplishment. Are you able to express what aspects of nature of each tree species influenced your choice of soundscape for it, and how? And then I'll read the next one while you process that. And then he says, how did you go about accessing this? I'm imagining you spending a lot of time lying down in the park looking at his tree. So yes, so the question is, are you able to express what aspects of nature of each tree species influenced your choice of soundscape for it? Who wants to tackle this one?
Yeah, I'll talk about that, because I think it's what we gave to composers was a real freedom. They had a real freedom of how they would go about writing their piece. I mean, everyone sort of was with their tree for about 10 months. And that's quite, in terms of a composer's life, quite a luxury to have that much time to write quite a short piece. And so I guess this links to the other question as well about the seasons. Seeing your tree, lose its leaves and in different environments, seeing the trees in Kensington Gardens in other parts of London, seeing the trees and gaining all sorts of inspiration on how to go about writing the piece. I know we talked a lot about recording sounds, and I think traditionally this is a way of collecting materials and preparing a work. But I think for a lot of composers, recording sounds was part of the work, and it became a large feature of the piece itself. And especially when we put everything on the website, this was a way of bringing people back in to a sense of the environment, not only to have music, but to have sounds that were recorded in that area, and really become a sort of immersive experience where you could feel like you were there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you didn't
and
lie down on the floor from listening to trees. Ben, Jack, Ben, did you want to add to that?
I think Jack was about to say something, but I will do it
Yeah.
afterwards. But Jack, go first.
I was just going to say that it was, in a way, it was a really humbling experience almost to write for the trees. In a sense, these trees are hundreds of years old, some of them, and you have an opportunity to add something into their rich history.
That's brilliant, Ben. What experience?
Just about the part of the question that's about, was there any aspects of the nature of each tree species which influenced choices? So on a few of the trees, they're quite evil. They had like thorns or like poisonous berries at some points in the year. But again, going back to that idea of seasons, as Andrew and Jack kind of mentioned, and sort of the longer lifespan, and this being a part, like a snapshot of a larger picture. I didn't want to write kind of like a horror film piece of music for all this like poisonous, prickly awfulness. So I think it highlights as well that there's two sides to everything. So for maybe 9 out of 12 months of the year, this tree was actually quite nice, and it maybe didn't have any leaves, and it was just kind of small. And then right at the end, it branched out and became more poisonous and evil. So I think there's parts in the music as well when for myself when I was writing my compositions. I was aware of these things when writing, but I think consciously chose to try not to highlight things in terms of sort of narrative and film music. I guess this would be referred to as kind of Mickey Mousing, in the sense that you're kind of you're lining up with something exactly in an image in a film, for example, and you're kind of hitting it. So if somebody punches somebody, there'd be a sound right on the hit. And I think that makes it kind of a bit disingenuous to what the tree is. So if I was to write just for the evil part of the tree at one part of the year, it kind of be dishonest and disturbing the rest of the year when people might listen to it and go and see the tree and think, hang on a minute, this is only a little tiny like bush. What's going on? So there is definitely, in terms of being aware of different aspects of each tree, it was kind of approaching it in a way that would be universally applicable to people listening to the project, as you are now, sort of a year after some of these pieces were created. So yeah, it's definitely something that was conscious in the process.
That was brilliant. I love the fact that you decided not to stereotype or Mickey Mouse your trees. Yeah. You gave them a new lease of life, I suppose, through music and appreciation, maybe a different angle of appreciation. Got a wonderful question from Vicky. Trees are homes to bird life, insects, squirrels, dog pee, apparently, and others. Did the tree as a home factor in any composition? Who's the biggest curator of the unknown to answer that question?
I mean, I think so. Just going back to what we were saying earlier, that the trees that overlap, so that where the leaves actually overlap and the canopies cross. On the website, you'll see there's 3 sort of mini red tree icons, and those are the multi-mixes. So in terms of the tree, when we were individually writing for the tree, it was very much the tree as a center focus. But then when you listen to those on the website, you hear the tree as like maybe 3 different trees as centers all interacting together. So I think there is this idea of a home or a grounding or kind of like a point of gravity. And then you hear the crossover between the sounds that we chose to represent for them. And there's also the idea that as a tree grows and branches out, it will cross over with others. So that's reflected in the music in the sense, as we've said, you can keep different tabs open and experiment with how these different kind of homes or centers will cross over with one another. Linking back to the whole kind of exploration idea of the project and what it means to have a sort of a chance to write for something on this scale.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear you explain that. We've got a question from Maya, which sort of leads on to the fact that you are very multifaceted as people, as human beings. And how about, and possibly now scientists, how about using tools that resonate in a scientific way with the trees to hear them on another level? Have you explored any other ways of listening to trees than just your ears?
I've come across composers who do this. There are sort of specialist microphones that you can put on trees, and you can hear the minute details of them. I know there's this, I think in America, a wide scale composition where a lot of sort of kind of like the electrodes that people put on people's brains to hear brain waves. They put scattered across forests all over America, and you can hear them in one central place. I think in terms of like physically hearing a tree, I think that's just another way of generating some kind of creative idea. And I wouldn't think that would be the only way to do it. I think it's just another way to do it, and it would be really nice. But yeah, I think the way people went about the compositions was really unique in the sense that there was freedom to go out and record, to have electronic instruments, and not be confined in usual settings like a concert hall or a small hall where you only have a limited number of resources.
Yeah, that's very interesting. With this idea, sort of developing this idea of listening to trees, essentially, I think 16 or 17 composers were contributing to this project, and some had contributed one, others collaborated like yourselves on some of the compositions, and others created 65 compositions, I hear. From, I think when I spoke to one of you, there's the yew tree, or the lemon
lime tree.
Lime tree, that's right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
There's quite a few of them, and they are considered to be too many, so they're almost forgotten trees. But 65 of them, and they all have I try to understand what you meant by it when you explained it to me, Andrew. But there are 65 variations of composition. What can you tell me a little bit more about what that is?
Right. So out of the 190 trees in the area that we composed for, I think there were about 65 lime trees, unique lime trees. And so each composer was given the task of writing just one piece of music to represent the entire species. But a composer, Jane Lee, she wrote 65 individual compositions. And the way she did that was by writing one piece of music and then changing instruments, changing subtle colors of the music. So it felt like the same piece of music, but you are hearing it in different ways, in the same way that a tree might be in the shade, or it might be slightly taller or leaning to one side. So you get this essentially a true representation of what all the trees are like.
So I really encourage everyone to play around on that lime tree area and just see what the variations, if you could spot in your variations, because it's quite interesting. I did spend a good hour on this, listening to all the music. It's so good. But then there was also the other compositions that were really interesting. And I guess that must be quite exciting to get to a point where you are receiving these compositions, like they're arriving in your inbox. Must have felt really exciting to listen to them all afresh, because everyone had a different approach. Some were more classically organized, others were just percussion, which I thought was quite interesting. How did it feel to be sort of the instigator of this project and start receiving these incredible compositions from people? Ben, over to you.
Yeah, it was really interesting, because going back, just linking it to the question about kind of the scientific noises of trees, or the resonance. Personally, parks are places that are built to increase happiness of people. That's kind of the purpose, I guess. Primarily, is it's a place of recreation for people to enjoy. So in a way, I think that the music that everybody created is a more honest translation of what the tree means to them, because that's what it's all about, really. That's the kind of the function, and in a way, to, in my mind, record the trees, or like the resonance frequencies that they produce. It's kind of like an objective way of looking at the tree, but yet the tree is defined by how people view it. Or if there might be like a football pitch next to one, or there might be kind of you can swim in the river in Hyde Park and things, or there's different activities taking place in these environments. So it's much more about how the composers, when they sent the pieces to us, chose to interpret that environment around their area of the tree, and voice that as a translation in their own creative way, than it was about kind of observing something scientifically. So that's what interested me about all the compositions, getting to hear them all for the first time. It just struck me about everybody's thoughts and opinions and approaches and ways of viewing these things that were personal to them, but yet still work so well as a collective, with everybody else's ideas and contrasting opinions.
Yeah, we don't have much time left. There'll be a few more questions really quickly, but a few of you mentioned while we were having a conversation in preparation of this, that the red oak composition is quite enjoyable and interesting to you all, in fact. And why was that? What was so compelling about that one composition that sort of drew your attention?
That was one of my favorites.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Was it all of your favorites too?
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting. Well, all of them are great. Let's just say they're all great.
Well, I guess for me, the reason why the red oak composition was so interesting, this was composed by Terence Wong. And I think this relates to one of the questions we had about trees are homes, bird life, insects, is the fact that it's so impossible to just look at trees as trees. You can't single them out. They are part of the environment. When you look at trees, you are in a space, you are with people, or you are with the sounds of birds, the wind. And in the red oak composition, Terence chose to use recordings of children playing. And it was just almost so surreal and haunting to hear this, because layered with this sort of atmospheric bell sounds, almost like another world. You have these really close and intimate sounds that are instantly recognizable with the school children playing, and it puts you into a space and lets your imagination go wild, I guess. And it's a real representation and a great example of how people took their experiences of trees. I don't know, maybe Terence was thinking about how trees were special to him in his childhood, and how trees are essentially a home to play and to nurture. That's what I really loved about that piece.
It was very atmospheric. Thank you. I do have another question. I'd love to use this one really quickly in this talk. I'm going to read it out. I really loved the website and its visuals. I wonder if they could tell us more about how the illustrations came about. The clouds over the map also look very beautiful. So it's more about the design of the website. Andrew, I guess you're the Mr. in charge of the website.
Well, yeah, Jack did most of the illustrations in terms of what you see first. So Jack, talk about your map.
Jack, I'm afraid.
Sure. So yeah, we thought that hand drawing the map would provide a bit of character and a bit of would look really nice in the homepage. So but I didn't have a piece of paper big enough to do the level of detail. So I ended up sticking together about, I think it was 12 sheets of A4 paper, and then drawing the map by hand. We then photographed the map and converted it to a vector image using software, which allowed us to scale it as the website zooms in and out. And yeah, that was, and then we to do with the color coding of the different trees to tie everything together. the little section of the map in the middle, the bit that everyone wrote the trees for, we decided that should be the only bit in color. So the attention was drawn to that. And each tree would have its own unique color that could reference back to the composer. That was a decision that all of us made, I think, to bring the website together.
And you were just drawing it from Google Maps, just by sight, really.
Yeah, I was using a tablet, a small tablet, with Google Maps on it, and tracing a rough outline of Google Maps, and then moving the tablet over and doing the next bit and the next bit, and eventually had the size of the map, which I then inked out in pen. It was great fun, actually.
Come and work with us. This is the artist. I also, I have to say, I found the website exceptionally easy to use, beautifully organized, simple to a degree of absolute beauty. I also know from having conversations with you that the photography was done by somebody else. It was nice the way you used everything available to you, all the tools available to you.
My sister Alice helped out with the photography. So we went out into Kensington Gardens maybe 5 or 6 times, taking a number of pictures. And we were very lucky that I had my sister to help out with that. But also the sky, at that time it was just the end of summer. So very pleasant weather.
Well, I think we've landed to the end of our talk now. I did want to offer any more questions to the audience, but I think we can just have one more, but very quick one to all three of you as a wrap up. What is the one thing you would like the audience to take away from this discussion? And let's do it in order as we introduced you all. So Andrew, Jack, and Ben, if that's okay.
I think the reason why this project it felt so close to us was because nature, I think trees in general, but nature in the more general sense, it has a way of demanding sort of our attention and focus. And if we really shift perspective and focus on different things and hear different things, we can sort of understand the world in many ways, and there's an infinite amount of ways we can perceive reality and life.
Yeah, that's brilliant. As a wrap up quickly, Jack, I know you put yourself on mute, but yes, what would you like the audience to take away from this project?
Well, to echo Andrew's point, really about connecting with nature, but how powerful music and creativity can be in expressing that connection. And it doesn't have to be music. It could be art, it could be song, it could be poetry, it could be anything. But thanks very much for tuning in.
Thank you. And Ben, what do you feel the audience can take away from this amazing project?
Yeah, I think that the thing I'd like people to keep in mind is, although we've talked about music and trees, the premise and the idea is applicable to any environment you're in. You could do it in your room if you're in your bedroom or your kitchen. Just listen to what's there and make a note of that, as is in the follow-up task, if you all go and have a look at that afterwards. And I mean, it's an example in my compositions. When I made the instrument of London, I literally just used my phone to record those noises and make it into an instrument. So it doesn't. I think a lot of people may be worried about access to equipment or ability, but it's more about just kind of using your way of representing the environment you're in and what you hear or what you see, if that's what you choose to focus on. That's what I'd like to sort of leave everybody with, is that interpret these things in your own way.
Yeah, and I have to say, you've inspired me to be able to try something new for definite. And because you've succeeded so well at doing this, it gives others inspiration, definitely me, to try something I haven't done before, like coding. So unfortunately, that brings us to the end of this lunchtime discussion. Thank you so much to Ben, Jack, and Andrew for joining us for this fascinating talk. I'm really looking forward to trying the listening exercise myself. For those watching live on YouTube, apologies if we're unable to get all your questions and thoughts read out. A recording of this discussion will soon appear on the Great Exhibition Road Festival YouTube channel for you to watch again and share with all your friends and colleagues whenever you want. All future live events and recorded video from the festival will be appearing on this new YouTube channel. So do follow us and you will get little notification when a new live event or recorded video has been posted. We will have a link that will be posted on the YouTube chat to an evaluation form. We have to do evaluations, and please do fill it out. Tell us what you think, where we could improve, what you thought of the event, any feedback whatsoever. We'd really appreciate it. Otherwise, that's it from me. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, and have a really, really good afternoon.